Hey, I'm Dr. Elad Granot. I'm an entrepreneur, investor, and dean of Cleveland's Business School, the prestigious Boler College of Business at John Carroll University. This show is designed for those who think differently. We talk candidly about innovations in technology, in startups, venture capital, the global economy, higher education, how to lead, how to fail. We will leave no stone unturned. Expect passionate and sometimes controversial conversations with guests from all over the business spectrum once every month, wherever you stream your podcasts. Welcome. Today's episode covers why Cleveland is the Midwest's clear hub for the future of MedTech. And this is Bottom Line with the Business Dean. So here are my hot takes for today. I have a couple. One is a survey just came out, a study came out that talks about working from home. And I'll introduce my guest at the proper time. I'm not being rude, or maybe a little bit rude, but I want Kendra to chime in on this. So a study just came out that employees decrease time spent working and increase their leisure time and sleeping. And employees, by that I mean people working from home. And so the study is, as I labeled it on my LinkedIn post, shocking. It's just amazing how people who stay at home sleep more, have more leisure time, and work less. And so, without tongue in cheek, I think this is proof of what most of us who've been in business for a long time, or most of us who have common sense, probably realize is happening when we work from home. That's my opinion. I wonder what yours is. But I'm not surprised whether you're for it or against it. The facts say that folks who are working from home are working less and sleeping more, which is, I'm a little bit jealous, I have to say, and have a little bit more leisure time. What do you think about that?
I think it's interesting. I haven't had time to read the report maybe in the detail to know how the results were compiled, and that people were honestly able to report that, which I think is surprising. But I do think that we're coming out of a time where we're going to find ourselves rebalancing. And as we have talked before, I think about just in this general of in our space of innovation or needing to be present, I think there's a lot of people who have found themselves on one end of a spectrum trying to come back to the middle and have maybe forgotten what it feels like being back in the office. And so I'm not surprised by the study at all.
Yeah,
I think it's how do we start to work on it as leaders to bring ourselves back to a point of something that feels more normalized.
And that is the key term, leadership. I think we have to insist on what we believe is the right thing for the organization and the people working in it. And I do believe that there are some jobs that do not necessarily require a lot of social interaction, and people self-select into those jobs, and that's fine. I'm not for forcing people into parties. Actually, let me think about it. Yeah, I'm not. And so, but having said that, you and I, we talked about this before we went on air. You and I wouldn't have been here right now. We wouldn't have known each other had we not been present in our positions over years now. So again, I should introduce you, so I'll get to that in a second. But the bottom line is, no wonder that's what the show is called. Bottom line is, working from home is problematic in terms of productivity. I understand the need for it in a pandemic. Hopefully, we'll never have a pandemic again, and not in a way. And by the way, even if we do, I don't think we're going to do the same things again. They didn't really work. Again, not getting to the political sides of things. The bottom line is, most people were able to eventually either have it and come out of it, or mask up, get vaccinated, whatever it is. Not sure. First of all, again, probably not going to happen again in our lifetime. But if it does, I don't know if we're going to do it the same way. Either way, managing a business school within an organization that's an institution of higher education, a university, built on students, built on faculty that are there for the students, to me, it's inconceivable to be away from it for prolonged periods of time. And we see the effect of that, and we will see the effects of that, I think, over the next few years as students get to rebalance and readjust to human interaction. So that's hot take number one. I don't know how hot it was. That's the take. Second take is, I think we hear a lot the term silos in business. We need to break down silos. We need to work in collaboration. There needs to be full transparency. I think silos get a bad rap. I think sometimes they're there for a very good reason. And I can think of a couple of examples, one in your industry, in healthcare and medical services, and one in mine in higher education. I'm all for collaboration and transparency, but I don't know if you guys know this, but a couple of months ago, I had decided that I'm going to be a chemist. I'm a chemist. And because even though I have no training in that, but I have watched a couple of YouTube videos about chemistry. I know a couple of chemists socially. I've even been in some companies that deal in chemistry, like refineries and stuff like that. So I think it's cool, and I decided I'm going to be a chemist. Why? Because I want to, and all silos are down, so I feel like I should do that. In fact, I work in an institution that has a chemistry department. I aspire to be the chemistry department chair simply because I think it's cool. And so that's the ridiculousness of getting all silos away.
At the extreme,
Yeah, but that's what happens. What happens when you break down silos of critical roles, and imagine if you did that in your organization, right? If you did in a medical organization where podiatrists are now going to be cardiologists, and I could make it funnier. And so I will. Proctologists will decide to be, see, it's already funny.
Yeah,
will decide to
it's
be
right
brain surgeons, right? Why not? Let's break down all silos. There are reasons for silos. So I'm all for transparency. I'm all for joint and shared and all the other stuff. But I think when we talk about shared responsibilities, then I'm more willing to listen to shared decision making. The issue is when it becomes so broken down and everyone has an opinion, even about stuff they know nothing about or haven't been trained to do, like me in chemistry, then we are in danger of diluting, washing down, and eventually actually creating damage. So I think some silos are there for a reason. That's my opinion. What do you think about that?
Well, I think what you're talking, I don't know that if you're against a transparent view to management structures and decision making that allow people that are on the outskirts to understand how they weigh into the conversation. Maybe they're not decision makers, they're not at the table, but they know their voices are heard. I don't hear you saying that, but rather than we all have to be at the table and we should all be able to weigh in, I think that's dysfunctional. Yeah. But I am one who really enjoys transparency around management structures, and RACEs are a big friend of mine, responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, just so that people understand their role and how do they have their thoughts heard. But I do think there again are pendulums there where if I'm not in the room, I wasn't heard, or it wasn't and I think that sometimes is just a function of having lack of management transparency.
Yeah, and to make it clear, when I talk about silos, I talk about capabilities and expertise, not about decision making or even conversation or even having input.
You wouldn't even be consulted in that process.
Right. So I'm all for everyone knowing what's going on. I hate when there isn't transparency, so I'm the last one to not provide transparency. However, I wouldn't want, as brilliant as someone is, a brain surgeon, I wouldn't want them managing my stock portfolio. No. And so because they're not in that silo. And so silos are not necessarily a bad thing. And organizations that mix that up, that sort of don't understand or don't want to understand that while there's value in sharing and collaborating, and I'm not saying that with any cynicism, and you would know if I say something with cynicism. So there's none of that. While there's value in sharing, there shouldn't be value in there shouldn't be sharing in expertise. So proctologists do their thing, whatever that is, and brain surgeons should do theirs. Accountants should do theirs, and so on and so on. That is what I mean by silos. And I think when we try to break down communication silos, if we break down other silos, we're actually hurting the organization. That's my hot take.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you. That's why you're here. Otherwise, whatever. So we're going to get into the conversation today, but really, it's time that I introduce my guest today, my longtime friend and colleague, Kendra Gardiner, who's now the director of product strategy at University Hospitals Ventures, an organization that I'm sure we're going to hear about as we talk today. But that's not where I know you from. We worked in the ecosystem. We have been working in the ecosystem in Northeast Ohio for a long time together. variety of capacities. Obviously, we have mutual passion toward that, and so it's great. You've spoken in my class online during the pandemic.
I know, it's
so
weird.
Not against, super weird. Not against it, but couldn't wait to get back to in person. And so I'm thrilled. I know how busy you are. I'm thrilled, and we were just talking about how busy we both are. Thrilled that you took the time. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you having me. I'm happy to introduce myself now.
Would you please? I mean, I wouldn't let you, so now it's...
So thank you for having me. I have known Elad for many years. I think we met during the days of Blockland, really kind of the first experience I had of convening a whole community around this opportunity to make Cleveland a better space for innovation, or a more well-known national space, maybe even global.
Yeah, that was the aspiration. Why not?
Yeah. But I today am the Director of Product Strategy at University Hospitals Ventures. It's a team of about 15, so a small team inside of a 30,000 employee system. And so there are a couple team members who are still on the team who were there in the early days. David Sylvan, who's a good friend of ours mutually, and Kip Lee, who were innovation directors at the time, just trying to figure out what does innovation look like inside of a big system like this. And it wasn't yet UH Ventures. But over time, they were able to convene the right thought leaders and begin to plant the seeds of a culture of innovation. And so I've been very fortunate to be tracking that. I think I met David in the early days of what was innovation at UH Ventures. I was still in manufacturing at the time. But today, I've only been in the Ventures team for a year, so it's been a long journey, 2016 to 2021. It will officially be a year next week. That I will have been part of the team. But I was brought in to really kind of think about product strategy in this growing ventures organization with now 15 team members and a venture fund under management. It is operating dollars that the institution is pulling off balance sheet to allow venture to happen within our team, which is deploying venture capital into our own startups and external startups. And so as that momentum has grown with innovations coming up through the system, we've also really been doing amazing work building the awareness on the outside. And we have about 300 startups that approach us every year now that are looking for what we like to call a living lab or a hospital partner to help them further their product development. Sometimes people are coming just because they're looking for venture capital and they aren't quite ready for us as a partner. But a lot of others have a really well thought out path, and they know what they need from a partner. And so I've been working with the team who has really laid the groundwork. I won't take credit for what they laid before I got there, but really bring in this overarching lens of what is innovation, what does our portfolio of innovations coming up through our system look like? How do we continue to nurture that pipeline with accelerator programs or other small, early stage paper napkin ideas to get them a little bit further along, leveraging state dollars through the Technology Validation Startup Fund. And then what does our portfolio of opportunities look like on the outside? And those really have to be informed strategically through the lens of what does the hospital system need? Strategically, what's a good fit? Yeah. So how do we bring structure around all of that and not break down silos?
However,
but collaboratively work cross-departmentally and understand where our lanes begin and end and where does someone else's, and how can we start to standardize processes to do that work. And so that's been a lot of the groundwork I've been working with the team on, making sure our processes are mapped and that the relationships are built and that the value exchange is understood so that we can continue growing this to scale.
That's amazing. And so as you're saying this, I'm throwing the script away because I really want to focus on two things. And I know I said no more than 30 minutes. So let's see if we can do this. First of all, if you don't mind, I'd love for you to take us back a little bit and tell us how you got here, right? So what qualifies you, obviously more than it qualifies me to be a chemist, to be doing that, right? How'd you get here? And then I want to spend the rest of the time on a conversation on everything you just said. But how's that happening in Cleveland? What is, because that's where we started, you and I, right? We thought we could bring the world to Cleveland. We still think that, right? And you're working in a world-class system.
Yeah.
And so if you could just take a step back, tell us how you got here.
I will give you guys a short journey. You've heard my longer journey.
I have.
But I moved to Cleveland in 2010 out of the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Important to get the Urbana-Champaign part. It's in my opinion, one of the most important public universities we've got in this country for engineering, but also for venturing. So I tend to have a lot of respect for my alma mater. They're doing a lot in terms of commercialization, ventures popping out and growing, and I think there's a lot to be learned there as well. We can talk about that some other day.
Definitely.
In terms of
I want to
maybe
steal everything they do.
Trips we can make
Absolutely.
together.
Cool.
But I came here to work at Poly1 Corporation. Today it's Avient. And so I started my career working very far back in the supply chain, doing new product development, helping to take a legacy corporation, publicly traded company, from being R&D driven, led, to market led. And so when you have 2,000 employees global, that's a big change. And so I came in at the time, and I'm very fortunate for this experience because I came at a time where there weren't a lot of marketing resources in this legacy chemicals company. They make tiny little plastic pellets. And so it's hard when you're talking about marketing and strategic marketing to help even myself at that age reframe like, well, how do I sell that? How do I do this work? But I am a chemical engineer, I'm not a chemist.
I'm a chemist.
And so I had enough knowledge to be dangerous about, understanding product performance starts with the chemistry put into that tiny plastic pellet. So while I was working that far back in the supply chain, I was actually working with all the OEMs. And so I traveled 90% of the time trying to do primary research around unmet needs of performance of your product in the market. Where are the failure points? So you can back into the chemistry. And so quite possibly one of the least sexy jobs you could ever think about having, but it was the most rewarding because you got to see product development from pure chemistry to final product and every manufacturing step in between. So then I left there and I worked in turnaround for about 4 years, where I would jump onto companies that were sinking ships and was doing still manufacturing, which was really exciting to get to be on the operations floor. I took on an operations role, had never done operations, but folks like Matt Lavin, who run Togus, a really well-respected injection molder, 3D, our rapid prototyping company, who I'd gotten to know and gave me a chance. He had worked with me long enough, and so I jumped in, started working in a company that he still is an innovator to this day, standing up all sorts of businesses, and so you're trying to balance your cash flows to do new things and take advantage of market trends. And so that was really great. And then I took on a role in Toledo. And I'll only mention the role in Toledo for the fact that one of the early innovations I was working on at that time, and this was a small injection mold builder, making molds out of aluminum QC10. A lot of people don't know you can make aluminum out of QC10 and run parts, but I won't get into the geeky science. But one of the coolest projects I was working on at the time with my sales manager was a project with Carroll West out of Centerline Biomedical, where they were trying to commercialize some tech out of their organization that sits inside of Cleveland Clinic Innovations. And today that company is MetaView XR. And so it wasn't at the time, it was really just an idea of, they knew they needed hardware, didn't know we could make it, and so I was very fortunate to go to work on the actual mold building and trying to run parts for the hardware component, never knowing that today we would see this amazing startup, MetaView XR, which we've recently signed a collaboration agreement with for augmented reality for ultrasound guided needle procedures.
Awesome.
And so it's been a really fun time for me to be in manufacturing. And then in that time, and I apologize it's taken so long, but how we got to know each other.
No, this is the short version. It's awesome.
This is the short version.
Yes.
During that time, I was on the board of Jumpstart. I had gotten connected to Ray Leach and joined the board of Jumpstart. And that was my first foray into economic development. Like, what is going on? And all of us kind of growing up, unless you're somebody who grows up in a family where all you do is talk about economic development, which is few and far between.
Very few people do that.
It was a great experience for me to really bring my soul to Cleveland, I say, because I moved here in 2010, and when I joined the board of Jumpstart, it really opened to my eyes that everything that was going on and what a gift that was through the lens of the work that Jumpstart was doing. and really got exposed to the tech economy. I was on the investing committee, so I got to review every investment that they were preparing, and got to have those discussions with some very brilliant minds. So Jumpstart operates with lots of committees, so you get exposure to all these professionals at the same time. And then through that time period of working in these small manufacturing companies where I'm pulling all these levers to try to stand them up, I had a baby. I had my first child. My son, Henry, has flown 70 times. He flew with me everywhere during that time. And I got tired, to be quite honest. And one day, Ray Leach and I were having breakfast, and I started asking him about thoughts on what else could be in Cleveland, that maybe I wouldn't have to travel so much. And then over time, work towards understanding what some of the needs were at Jumpstart, because at the time they were about to have their first unicorn exit. There was other things happening. And then shortly thereafter, I had joined the organization, and one of the first projects I took on was standing up the Plug and Play office in Cleveland, which was how, and so that was an amazing point in my career, because I'm working with Cleveland Clinic Innovations. I'm working with David Sylvan at University Hospitals. I'm working with the likes of yourself and everyone else who got involved at that time to really start to realize and bring what ultimately at the time was a much needed asset to our community, because we had a lot of health tech startups that were starting here, but were struggling to get access to a hospital partner because the tracks had not been laid. They honestly had not been laid into our institutions to even allow them to navigate that in any productive way.
Yeah, I from the second you said it, I latched on to brought my soul to Cleveland. I feel the same way. You're right. There's a time you move to Cleveland if you're not from here, and there's a time where you feel like you brought your soul here, right? And I know exactly what you talk about. I couldn't have put it that eloquently, so I'm glad you did. So let's segue here. Then there's so much potential here, right? And so you and I know it, and you and I are working on it, and we're trying to maximize it. Work with everyone else we know. I always say that what's cool about Cleveland is, first of all the stuff that I'm going to ask you about. What is it about Cleveland that gives us the potential to be a hub of MedTech or what we thought initially would be blockchain? It doesn't really matter. We need to figure out what it is. What is it about it? But one thing I will say is that the degrees of separation in Cleveland are far fewer than they are in any other market, almost anywhere, certainly around the country, but even around the world. You know, I just came back from the airport. Literally every time I go to the airport, it's like a high school reunion. It's like, hey, you know, it's like people you work with in a variety of levels. You don't have that in New York. You don't have, not even in Silicon Valley or anywhere. Boston definitely don't have that. And so definitely that's one of the things I think even when we try to put things together, we reach out to each other on a direct level with no BS, right? And so it's very organic and I think we're all pro Northeast Ohio, pro Cleveland. So tell me a little bit about that. What do we have here? And if you see it from, specifically from a UHV perspective, what do we have here that gives us the potential to become an epicenter, to become a hub of MedTech or whatever you think we could do to become that?
I will give it to you from my view from sitting inside of University Hospital, but I'll layer on my understanding from the outside at the same time. I'll try to do it in that way. So I get really excited to think about the opportunity for MedTech startups, whether it's software device, anywhere around the world. And we're seeing more and more of that coming in through university hospitals, which is exciting. So we do have 3 powerhouse hospital institutions in our community, which is amazing. And they all have different differentiators, right? So reasons that they exist. I think the thing that's really interesting about university hospitals, and I've heard this more and more from startups that have come to see us at UH, and like, why us and why not somewhere else? And University Hospitals is a regional hospital. We have 21 hospitals. We have, most people don't know that. I mean, we serve about 500,000 patients in our ACO, so that's the Medicare population. We have rural hospitals. We have urban hospitals. We are pretty much any patient population you would maybe want to approach based on the focus of your startup, we can represent that pretty easily. So I think that diversity gives us an advantage in some ways. We're also really easy to work with. I think
It's critical.
I have said since I arrived that the humility of not only the ventures team but the other leaders that we work with is just amazing. And that's not because people are so humble, it's just their level of understanding. They know that they have reached their expertise and when to hand the ball off to someone else. It's just almost like ego is checked. I'm sure that I'll find ego somewhere, but in a year I haven't, which has been great. It means we can get to work. It means that we can trust each other. And we have that same level of humility with the people we interact with. I think the other thing that I am encouraged by is the amount of venture capital that we're starting to grow. We're not there yet. We're not where we need to be, but there has been a lot of intentionality around making sure we have the right capital at the right stages. And I've been very encouraged by that because medtech or health tech startups, they're a little bit more riskier in the beginning. And if you don't have riskier capital available at all, that's hard. That's hard to grow it here. And one of the last initiatives that happened before I left Jumpstart to transition over to University Hospital was to create an earlier stage collaborative fund in partnership with the state of Ohio to help pull more of those startups forward that sometimes cross that I always call it the valley of death, right? There's several valleys of death, and that early stage is one of the riskiest. So we're seeing more of that. We've started investing out of that fund. I think the other thing that's needed is talent. And that is one thing we haven't
In which
solved.
fields? In tech, in VC, in both?
Probably in both.
Okay.
But from within, when we think about, and we haven't completely cracked this one, but it's the opportunity that I think a lot of people are, like Destination Cleveland has a person that's just focused on talent now. That's a new role that I had spoken with Hannah Belcito about, and I saw the announcement. It's been a little while, but I get excited that people are pulling on the right levers, and that, having seen strategies written that were done collaboratively, maybe not perfectly, prior to Bibb taking office, in hopes that maybe some of that could be adopted by our new mayor in our city. But how we think about capital, how do we think about talent, how do we think about digital access, how do we think about our major industries like manufacturing and healthcare. So those things all give me hope, because if we have talent, if we have capital, if we have the right partnerships and we can assign the right value to those that are building their product or their offering, then we can help out, take those further and put ourselves on the map of somebody that helped commercialize, whether that's our own or someone on the outside.
Yeah, I asked you specifically about whether it's VC or tech, because those are two things that obviously we certainly VC is a huge gap around here, right? And so I'm glad to hear that you're working on it. I know everybody's working on it. We're working on it. So I'm on the side of the ecosystem that pumps talent into it. And so I know I'm not producing as a business school dean. I'm not producing any VC talent into the ecosystem. So we have to import, right? And so that's about to change. I'm launching a student managed venture fund that will manage student entrepreneurship initiatives. I'll seed it as the dean. There'll be donors that'll push more money into it, and there'll be GPs in that fund. And then the students will learn how to be venture capital managers.
But you know what I like about this, and this is one thing that I've thought so much more about as I'm now old, trying to help bring up that next generation. I think education systems do a really good job of teaching the science, but what you just talked about was the art. And it's the thing that keeps me up the most when I'm trying to help train, is it's hard without those experiential opportunities to really get to the art of things, because you can know the science, but there's an art in everything that you do that I think is a gap in some of the programs that I've seen, in terms of, you get someone straight out of a program, and so much of what you're trying to build around is you've got the science, but how do I get you into that?
Yeah,
art?
I equate, I'm glad you brought that up. I equate business schools to medical schools in the sense that I produce folks who are supposed to ensure the financial health, the business health of organizations, preventatively and proactively. And then if something goes wrong, turn it around and have the skills to do it. You cannot, absolutely cannot gain these skills in an efficient manner without actually doing them while learning them. So you can read all the books in the world and learn from those book smart professors in the world and watch all the videos you want, and whatever it is, it's not like doing it. And so I see my role as making sure that I, first of all, am a responsible partner in the ecosystem and produce into the ecosystem what it actually needs. And that is, I think, certainly within the financial field or making sure that we're strong enough financially, having the skills to bring, grow, sustain venture capital around here, focused on this region. So I think that's critical, and it's nice to hear it validated on your end. And then I think there's still a significant lack of tech proficiency. Maybe I'll talk about that towards the end. And then we also have to worry about brain drain and making sure that not only do we attract here, and we need to keep attracting here, but keeping our talent here is I think critical.
I agree. I couldn't agree more.
Awesome. So Kendra, this week both of us were at Futureland, which was a phenomenal experience from so many perspectives. I'll let you explain what that was. I can tell you that I was so pleased to be in that collaborative Northeast Ohio Cleveland focused event, but more than that, so many people were there. It's almost like we sort of skipped over the last 2 years like they never happened and right back into the fold, which is what I was pretty certain would happen, but it was nice to see that actually happen. So tell me about your experience there and what you took from Futureland.
Well, I was very fortunate to be on a panel, and to have good reason to go. And I tried to really dedicate my whole Thursday to just being present, because I think it's, we don't get these opportunities anymore. And we shouldn't let them get away from us. But to give your listeners some insights, I was there with our Chief Diversity Officer, Selena Cunanan, and Ann Conkley, who runs a consulting practice, really coaching advanced practitioner nurses in terms of what is entrepreneurship, which gives me a lot of excitement and hope also. And that's kind of a double-edged sword. But our talk was on the transformation happening and needing to happen in healthcare. So it was, for me, just being on the panel, that was great because the audience was so engaged. And I can't remember the last time I was at an event where there was so much dialogue back and forth in a very candid and open way that the richness of that conversation for me was great. It made being a panelist much easier because you weren't feeling like you were boring everybody. But outside of that, I had a lot of people approach me about innovative things that they were doing in the health tech space. I have a lot of follow-ups to do, which is exciting because I don't know if these would have gotten on our radar.
Exactly.
And so to your point about work from home, I think we need to get out there and we need to be together because it was a good reminder of how those random interactions can lead to potentially amazing opportunities.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I actually was a fireside chat, so I was the only one there, and I did bore everybody. What I talked about was the necessity, and that's going to be my closing statement. So we're sort of blending together what I did into what I want to say towards the end of this, which is the bottom line of today's conversation for me. I talked about the necessity to implement technology into higher education at all levels, all majors, all colleges, all disciplines, and the logic behind it. So for centuries, I don't think I'm exaggerating, probably millennia, higher education has been the same model, and it's been founded on a liberal arts core, which the underlying explanation for is that it gives a foundation to a young person moving into their lives, into their careers, and I couldn't agree more. My undergraduate degree, as opposed to yours, mine was in English literature. Very, very deliberately, I wanted that foundation because I knew I was going to pursue a business career. I knew I was going to pursue advanced degrees in business. I actually wanted to give myself a liberal arts foundation. I think I'm very grateful that I did that. I'm very proud to be in an institution that really sets its foundation of education, higher education, on that. Having said that, it is simply no longer sufficient to have that as a foundation for a young person moving into their lives, into their careers. What's missing, glaringly, to the point where it's almost criminal, is tech proficiency. And what I'm talking about is you don't necessarily have, if you're studying English Lit like me, you don't have to know how to program an AI engine. You don't have to know how to actually work with data, but you need to understand the concepts and what it can do. You need to understand what AI can do. You need to understand what blockchain is, what utility it has. Well, even if you're never going to do it yourself, you need to be in that world. And I remember the first time I brought that up, I said, I want to implement a tech core into the business school curricula. God forbid I get into any other curricula in the university. But luckily, I'm the business school dean, and I proposed that. And I remember another dean from a school that's not a business school said, well, why would an English major need to know about blockchain? And my response was, for the exact same reason that a finance major needs to know about Shakespeare. It's the exact same thing. And so the integration of technology, our hosts today, our production team, are digital natives, right? They were born into this, what I'm struggling by the skin of my teeth to hang on to. They were born that way. Yeah. But what I see is a significant lack of understanding technology because we don't provide it in higher education, not on a institutional level like we do liberal arts. So what I'm saying is we need to start looking into that, and that's certainly in a business school. That's what I'm going to be pushing into the curriculum. And my bottom line for today is whether you're in school or not in school, whether you are in your 20s or your 50s, like someone turning 54 today, get yourself knowledgeable. Get yourself familiar with technology. It's everywhere. And what worries me is I sometimes talk to business owners or executives who say, I'm not in technology. My company is not a technology company. Yes, it is. And you just made it worse. And so we are all in technology. Everything we're doing now is in technology. So it's one thing to not know technology, but to not know that you're in technology, that is problematic. You're probably not going to end up well, you and your organization. So what I'm saying to everyone is business is technology and technology is business. And so the integration of both is really, it's not the future, it's the present. And so we have to make sure that as we produce this talent into the ecosystem for you to capitalize on, I need to make sure that they're prepared, and that's by providing them with a tech core. Because if I don't do that, you're going to do it. You're going to get to the point where you say, well, your graduates are wonderful in accounting and finance, but they have no idea about technology, so now I have to train them. And at a certain point, you'll start saying, like Google's doing, like Amazon is doing, like Facebook is doing, you'll start saying, hey, you know what? Skip college. We'll teach you how to do it. And by the way, they're right, because I'm not doing my job the way I should be doing. Google's now in higher ed. They don't want to be in higher ed. I'm forcing them to do it by not providing a tech core. That's the bottom line.
Well, I hope that you get that done, because I think once higher ed starts to reflect that, we see that coming down through our high schools, through our junior highs, through our elementary schools, and we have got to get everybody kind of caught up. So yes, everything. I just spoke at a high school on Friday, and I asked the whole class. It was an entrepreneurship class. Tell me about a technology company. And to me, this is our greatest opportunity. Is I'm standing in a class, and the only tech companies the students name are Google and Apple, and you can think down the Google Classroom. And I was like, think a little further. And that's just a symptom of the overall. We're not talking about it in a way. So I completely agree. I didn't have a tech core, but I'm also a very curious mind. So you give me a word and I am on it. I am like figuring it out. Yep. And that's every day now in my job, because there's so many words that are being told to me from surgical procedures, because I'm not a proctologist, as we talked about earlier.
And that's good. That's a good thing.
But I am fully supportive.
Actually,
I think that's amazing.
I can't think of a better closing line than I'm not a proctologist. So with that, Kendra, I'm going to thank you for coming. It's been a sincere pleasure for me. I hope it wasn't so bad for you.
It was amazing.
Thank you. I enjoyed it very much. That's the bottom line with the business deans. See us next time.
Thank you.
Hey, so thanks for joining us for the Bottom Line with the Business Dean. If you liked what you saw and you liked what you heard, please leave us a rating and a review. And be sure to check out the Boler College of Business on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn for more of what's happening with the Business Dean. That's me. And we'll see you next time.